Hey, Paul. Hey, I got Paul Smith. Sell with a story. Now, is that the title of a good book or what? Paul, you and I are going to chat back and forth here a little bit about why every salesperson should buy this. Why should they? Why should they buy this book?
Well, I think what I learned in a lot of the research I did, and I ended up interviewing salespeople and professional procurement people at probably 50 or 60 different companies around the world. One of the things I learned is that, of course, salespeople are already telling stories. So that's the concept is not new. But what I learned was that most of them are only using stories in a fraction of the opportunities or the places they should be using stories. In fact, I ended up concluding that there are probably 25 different stories that all salespeople ought to be able to tell, that ought to be in their mental repertoire of stories. But most of them only have 5 or 6. That was kind of the learning for me. And it wasn't because they didn't want to have them. They just didn't know that there were other types of stories they should be telling.
You know, it's interesting because you said you did research with procurement people and salespeople. Was there a different angle you heard coming from procurement people
Yeah.
versus salespeople?
Yeah. In fact, I'll have to admit that my original plan was just to interview salespeople for the book for obvious reasons. And then I kind of, not really on a lark, but more of as a last minute decision, decided to add some procurement people in. And by the end of the research, I was convinced that I learned more from the procurement people than I did the salespeople. And in
Wow,
hindsight, it
that's
probably,
scary. That's
yeah.
scary.
Well, I mean, and it should make sense, right? I mean, who better to tell you what sales stories work and which ones don't work than professional buyers who do nothing all day long other than listen to salespeople tell their stories, right? So in hindsight, it makes sense. So I'm certainly glad I did it. But yes, I was asking them different questions than I was asking the salespeople. You know, I was asking them questions like, tell me the best sales story you've ever heard and the worst sales story you've ever heard. And one of my favorite questions I asked the procurement people was, what makes a sales pitch sound like a sales pitch? And I got some really interesting and in some cases off-color answers to that question. So a lot of things that I learned that you probably should not do. In fact, they said things like, yeah, when I can tell that I'm being pitched something, the hair on the back of my neck starts to stand up, and yeah, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And they described what those things are like, and we definitely want to avoid some of those things.
Okay, so what were some of the secrets that they shared with you that, we better not go down
Yeah.
that road?
Yeah, so 2 or 3 things I think I recall. One of them was anytime they hear a phrase that sounds like, if I could save you X amount of dollars in 20 days, would you buy this product? Or something to that effect. It was basically, if I could do this for you, if I could show you this, would you buy this? And the reason I think they felt like that turned them off as an obvious sales pitch was to them, it felt like you're trying to get me to commit to buying something before you've even told me what you're selling. And something about that felt disingenuous. It was like, tell me what you're selling, tell me why I need it, and then I'll decide. Don't make me decide up front. If you do this, because then you're going to make me a liar if I don't buy your product. The other one that was more useful, I think, was they said, the next 2 are, when the tone of the conversation changed from conversational to something that sounded like it was scripted or memorized, right? And they said, like you and I are just having a conversation right now, and we're going to stop and pause, and I'm going to say a few ums and ers, and that my tone of voice is going to change, and I'm going to forget what I was going to say, and then I'll pick back up. And that's how human beings have a conversation. But if everything coming out of my mouth sounded like I was reading to you from my book, you would know I was reading something to you or telling you something that was memorized. And they said, as soon as the conversation changes from extemporaneous to memorized, then they know the actual sales pitch has started. And that's an immediate turnoff to them.
That is so interesting because one of the comments I always say, the best sales presentation ever made is the one never given. Just have a conversation, and you just kind of confirm that. And I just kind of made that up, and you confirmed it with research. Yeah, I feel good.
Yeah, good. In fact, that's why one of the pieces of advice I have in the book is as you're coming up with your sales stories, don't script them out and write them down word for word. Because if you do that, of course, you'll be tempted to memorize them and then recite them word for word. The best way to capture them is just in bullet points. Just handwritten, or you can type them out if you want, but this is not something you would give to the buyer. This is just your own notes, and that's the way you would remember your story, is just a few bullet points. You remember chronologically what happened in the story, and then every time you tell it, it will sound extemporaneous and new, and it'll sound like it's the first time you've ever told the story, because it will be the first time you've ever told the story exactly that way. And that's how I think you want them to sound.
And I think that's one of the things, when I read the book, I was really taken back by, you say to really share the story in a natural way. It's got to come across as a conversation, because again, it can't be a script. It can't be that way. And I think that's hard for salespeople, because salespeople, whether it be that rote presentation, that marketing, you and I both came out of the same industry where marketing was notorious for putting together all these marketing materials, and what they wrote is supposedly what we're supposed to say.
And the salesperson has to go out and give what the marketing guy wrote, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah.
So I think the way around that, or I'm sorry, did you have a more specific question?
No, jump in, go.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I want to clarify what I'm talking about when I talk about sell with the story is real stories. I don't mean your sales pitch. I don't mean sell with a sales pitch. That's kind of redundant, isn't it? I'm not talking about, here's a way to memorize your sales pitch so that it sounds like a story. No, that would be memorizing a sales pitch and trying to make it sound like a story. I'm talking about actually using real stories within your sales pitch, and sometimes instead of your sales pitch, but probably in addition to, as part of your sales pitch. Okay, I'm going to give you a few facts and a few pieces of data and the price of my product and the quality specs. And now I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you about our service after the sale, and then I'm going to tell you about something else, and then I'm going to tell you a story. I mean, the story is not the whole thing. It's different pieces of it. But those stories are the parts that are going to sound and feel and be the most genuine and authentic, and the most memorable part of the entire sales pitch is going to be the story that you told them about the last customer that they sold that really needed the product just as much as they do, and what they do with it. And they're not going to remember all of your bullet points and facts and data and arguments, but they will remember the stories that you tell.
And again, I think what you just said, authenticity. Authenticity is missing with so many salespeople. And it's interesting, but I think procurement people pick up on that, because they really are they are professionals. They listen to salespeople all day long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they will listen to far more sales stories than you will ever give in your lifetime. Right? Because they may listen to 15 or 20 sales pitches a day. Most salespeople are not giving that many sales pitches a day. Some are, but most are not. But most professional buyers, they have a full day, all day long, of nothing but salespeople coming in and out of their office. So they're far more experienced at sales stories than we are.
Wow, that's neat. Hey, we got to wrap this up, but Paul Smith, and it is all about sell with a story. And I'll tell you what, it's a dynamite book from a sales standpoint. And hey, you and I both have a common friend, because Mike Weinberg wrote the foreword for your book, and he wrote the introduction for my book. And that's actually how we met.
Yes,
and I'll tell you what, let's do a little shout out for Mike, because he is one heck of a great guy.
He is. Mike, thanks so much for your contributions to both our books.
You bet. Hey, thank you much. We got to run.
Thank you.
Talk later. Bye.